Narrative therapy, reauthoring the self. Now, this is a conceptual toolkit for rewriting problem-saturated stories. And we all have problems in our life. And we can all sort of go through life thinking our problem is part of us. Or we can rewrite our stories and look at things differently. And that's where the power of narrative therapy holds. Now, let's go through this. We have an axiom. Identity is not the illness. Now, this is very important because according to narrative therapy, we have our identity, and the person is separate from their problem. Now, identity, is it the person plus the problem, or is identity the self, the person, but their problem separate from the self? Now, we do have relationship with our problems, and we have different relationship with our problems, but that's about it. It doesn't define us. Now, problem is a separate entity, it's an external entity, and the person is separate. The person, the self, is the identity. The problem is external to them. That's why the identity is not the illness. So the self, the person, is not the illness. The person is the person. The problem is the problem. The person is not the problem. So that's at the core of narrative therapy. Now, there are three philosophical pillars: social constructivism, the power of language, inherent agency. Now, to look at it, we have social constructivism as our house, or how we build our truth, or our story. Now, for that, we need to use certain tools to build that house, to construct that truth. And we use our language. Now, there needs to be certain structure to this, and these are where our inherent agency comes in. People possessing skills, values, and competencies. Now, with social constructivism, truth is not an objective fact, it is a negotiated story shaped by cultural and political context. Now, this is subjective, so the person will have certain cultural and political context that shapes them, and that becomes their truth. Now, the language they use, that defines their reality to a certain extent and constructs it. So changing the story or changing the language changes the experience. So that's a very powerful tool. Basically, knowing, understanding that how we are affected by cultural and political contexts. The way we look at it, the way we use our language, how it shapes our story, our lived reality, and our experience. And these are sort of given a direction by our skills, values, and competencies. So these need to change the relationship with their problem. As we change our skills, values, and competencies in relation to our problems, we have a better power of language, and we better have an understanding of how to construct our truths. And these are extremely powerful in a way that a person can reauthor their story, and knowing that they are separate from their problem. Now, problem-saturated stories is when a person says, I'm a depressed person, I am an anxious person, and so forth. Clients often arrive burdened by a dominant narrative that defines them solely by their struggle. So they are their struggle, or struggle is part of them. But that's not true. Struggle is a struggle. Depression is depression. Anxiety is anxiety. It's the relationship to that is what counts, is what changes things, separate from them, therefore. Now, technique one that can be used is externalization. The process of separating identity from the problem to reduce guilt and create a space for agency. Now, this is the same agency that we said before in our inherent agency. This is where it would create the way we use our values, competencies, and skills. We can only do that. We can use our values, competencies, and skills, or use them in a different way, or improve them when the problem is separate from our identity. That's when we can do it. If this problem is part of it, there is no space to actually sort of look and make changes and look at things differently. Now, the linguistic shift is, instead of saying, I'm an anxious person or I am anxious, the therapist asks, when anxiety visits you, what do you think? Or what's your relationship to anxiety? Now, the problem is not fused anymore with the identity. The problem, it's called fused identity. It's now separate. It's at the separate states. The problem is separate, identity is separate. So the client says, oh, my relationship with my problem is such and such. It's separate. There is a space for agency now. So they can experience it differently, construct the truth differently, use a different language, because there is this space to use the values and skills, competencies they hold in a right way, in a sense. Now, technique two is deconstruction. Now, this is examining taken for granted truths and the cultural origins of problem. Now, let's say the person is from a minority group, or is a person who has been affected in a negative way by societal standards, media messaging, cultural expectation. They feel unworthy. Now, by deconstructing this unworthiness, the person will start to understand, oh, okay, I feel unworthy because of these societal standard or these messages I receive from media, cultural expectation, the looks of had in the street and things like that. Now, this, in a way, is similar to social constructivism, but from a different angle. Now, this time we've come to that problem. We've got the problem. Now we are starting this onboarding, and now we are starting to deconstruct it. We are starting to look at it differently. We're starting to see what's the roots of it are and how it's shaped. So we begin to basically notice how societal standards dominate our story of worthiness or unworthiness in this case. Now, another technique is mapping the influence. Now, there are two ways you have the problem influencing the person influencing the problem. Now, the preferred way is the person influencing the problem, not the other way around. Now, how has the voice of regret affected your relationship with your kids? Problems influence on person. Now, but understanding how that happens, instead saying or explaining how have you influenced the life of the problem. Now that's different, isn't it? Now we can easily get to the way that the problem influences the person. Now, the right way or the way that we can map the influence is actually how the person will influence the problem. Then that would change things. So, for example, now your relationship with regret, that has affected your relationship with your kids. How have you influenced regret, your relationship with regret? How have you influenced it? How have you changed it? Oh, I thought such and such, actually. I started to look at it differently because of the cultural context and societal standards. I started using a different language. I started to understand that regret is part of life, but it's separate from me. It's how I actually react to it, is the influence that it has on me. Therefore, I started to actually look at it differently. I've learned so much from it, and so forth. That narrative would actually influence the person differently because they are starting to influence the problem, not the other way around. Now, that's the turning point. That's the sparkling moment. So the therapist listens to unique outcomes where there are times that the problem did not have that much power. So let's say the problem is anger, where for the person, the anger didn't have that much power and they looked at anger differently. These are the building blocks of a preferred narrative. And that's what basically the therapist and the client can actually zoom in, and it's a seed for a new story, new way of look at it. It's a turning point. It's like a bridge. That's interesting. That can be used to reauthor their life. maybe something from the past that they've looked at or done things differently in relation to their anger, something in the present, or their thoughts, the way they are looking at things, their feelings towards it, or their behavior that they've had. That can be sort of used as a seed for a new story to reauthor their life, using constructing their stories again from a different angle, using the right or the language that helps them, and sort of creating this space between themselves and the problem, and using competencies, skills that require for them to reauthor their life. Now, as part of this, it can be that the person uses different mechanisms. For example, therapists write letters documenting progress. Client invites outsider witnesses, friends, professionals to hear the new story. Now, this sense of social recognition, the outside witness, letter writing, it provides a new way to look at their stories and sort of bringing a community side to their story, and for them to actually see it from a different angle within a different environment with different factors that affect it. In fact, rewriting the narrative for that matter. Now, reauthoring the narrative is moving from a thin description, i.e., a starting state, to thick description that honors values, hopes, and triumph. Now we have first focus, which is singular deficit. The client moves away from it and goes towards multi-layered value-based process, in a sense. This is where basically they see their life or they focus on their life from a different sort of angles, different values, and it's not sort of narrowed anymore. It's a lot more wider. Now, row 2 is identity. Now, instead of being fused with the problem that they have, they see themselves separate from the problem, and they move towards problem is the problem, person is the person, person is not the problem, myself or self is not the problem, it's separate. So that helps in terms of the identity. They start to deconstruct their identity and then construct a new reality for themselves. And the third row is agency. So from being a passive victim, they start being an active author of what they are doing, their life. Things are not happening to them anymore. They are actually influencing the outcome now. That's where our techniques come in, and basically it helps to map their relationship to the problem, person to the problem differently. The person is affecting problem, influencing the problem, not other way around. Now, row 4 is origin. Now, it was an internalized blame that it was starting from. Now it's gone towards contextualized and deconstructed sort of origin, way of thinking. Now, understanding that there are contexts, there are politics, cultures influencing the person, there are societal standards, media messages that would actually impact the person. And knowing these will help them to better compartmentalize compartmentalize their way of thinking, and they see it as different sort of parts of society, norms and cultures and politics affecting them differently, and how that has resulted in them constructing their reality. And therefore, they can change that by knowing it, by being aware of it. Now, the narrative journey, it starts from the draft, which is the problem-saturated story, goes towards externalization, sort of separating the problem from the person, and thereafter the margins, which is the deconstruction and the mapping. Oh, this happened. Oh, I see. This is the problem, and this is where it comes from. How it happened, and let's bring it together. Let's show it to others. That sort of thing. And then highlighter, which is the sparkling moments. It's the moments that they start to say, okay, I'm seeing things differently now. I have deconstructed it. I have remapped it. I'm influencing the problem. I'm seeing it differently now. And that helps to rewrite the story. And then it's a matter of celebrating it, in a sense that the person is not the same person negatively impacted as much, um, because of their narrative. They see it differently, they understand it differently, and that's worth celebrating. They published a book, they've reauthored it, and have witnesses of this reauthoring, and therefore they've gone through the narrative journey and they've reauthored it themselves, which is worth celebrating in that sense. Thank you.